You're still watching the City of Lagos TV show, and of course, welcome to the special, very strategic segment. We call it Transport Lagos. And of course, we know, considering the geographical position of a cosmopolitan city like Lagos, water dominates a larger percentage of the landmass. Looking at the intramodal transport system, talking about rail, road, and water, Lagos State has actually expended energy, huge investment to make water transportation following the mantra of one of the agencies we're going to be looking at. We're talking about travel water, travel safe. It's my pleasure to welcome the General Manager of the Lagos State Waterways Authority, LASWA. This is one of the strategic agencies that has been saddled with the responsibility of making water transportation the safest and, of course, the most reliable transport system in Lagos. You're welcome, Mr. Oluwadamilola Emmanuel. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
First, water transportation is a fundamental means of transport for a state which has its landmass covered with water. So what is the level of creativity, initiative, and strategies is LASWA taken to take full advantage of this potential?
Thank you very much. I think, first of all, critically is identifying what areas are accessible by water in Lagos. And the state government over the last 30, 40 years has been very intentional in identifying those areas and ensuring that people in those areas can have access to other parts of town through the waterways. So we see a lot of infrastructure which has been built in terms of jetties and recently, in recent times, terminals, which we call, which are much bigger than the jetties, but they are the infrastructure which enables you embark and disembark and be able to get to your final destination. So we first of all saw those infrastructure being set up over the years. And now what's happening is upgrading that infrastructure now, because when they were built back then, it was more for communities and communities were crossing from one community to another. But where we now have people now coming to the central business areas from those outer communities, it's very important that we upgrade those infrastructure to be able to meet with the current demand of today. So we've seen some of those concrete jetties which were built back in the day now have what we call floating pontoons attached to them, which allows for multiple berthing. We've seen, Lagos transition from the open boats to the closed boats, and then even now to the bigger boats, which can take 40 to 50 personnel. So we've seen in terms of infrastructure, now the jetties, terminals, the boats, and also now even deploying technology to be able to ensure that people can now, through technology, make payments for boat operations, even though that's currently functional just on Lagos ferry services, where people can also now even track their movements through technology as well. And people can also even alert the agency in terms of any emergency, and then we can easily respond. So we've seen a lot of that as well. And even for us as an agency, to be able to ensure that we have the visuals of the waterways through technology. By sitting in an office, we're able to adequately monitor and track what is going on the waterways. So in terms of the jetties and terminals being built, in terms of the boats themselves, and of course, in terms of even the emergency and safety services, through technology, we've seen a lot of improvements.
There's been several initiatives and achievements of the agency since you came on board. Can you just catalog what are the major, very significant landmark achievements of LASWA?
Majorly, we've been able to optimize existing infrastructure. There were infrastructure which were lying dormant, which we had to upgrade and which now has become, we'll call the pride of the waterways. One of them, for example, is the Ikorodu terminal, which now even has a fuel dump, apart from the fact that we have boats berthing there, which has, supermarkets in there, shopping complex, adequate parking, park and ride for passengers. They were using a local jetty just by the side, a wooden jetty. But now we have a modernized full terminal with a building and even a floating pontoon attached to it as well, with effective park and ride services, and of course a fuel dump as well now for them. So that was just one of the major achievements. Secondly, we've also been able to increase our water guards, which we call our own water guards, our own personnel on the waterways. And this has led to a significant decrease in the amount of incidents we've seen on the waterways. It has helped to increase the safety levels because we now have adequate coverage at each of these jetties and terminals. Initially, we had about 48 personnel. Right now, as we speak, we have 108 personnel. So 60 were added to that number, and we've seen the impact of that as well. Of course, another achievement is the first of its kind in sub-Saharan Africa, an inland waterways control, which was commissioned late last year by Mr. Governor himself. And that is to enable us begin to gather adequate data to make informed decisions for the waterways, enable us to be able to begin to track the movement of the vessels, both cargo and passenger vessels on the waterways, enables us in terms of being able to respond in terms of emergencies as well. And then obviously as well, we've also seen the importance of the awareness and sensitization of the wearing of the life jackets. We've been able to propagate that as well a lot more. And finally, it's critical to understand that no government can fund transportation on its own. You need foreign direct investment. And we've also been able to attract investment from both the British and even the French as well, and several other interests from other countries. So we've seen that investment being made by the British and the French governments as well to the waterways.
What has been the level of human capacity building strategy of LASWA? Because water transportation requires some level of expertise, really.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's been very, very important for us. Now we're almost double the size of the admin structure we used to have from years ago. It's been very important that we have been very dynamic in making sure we're meeting with international best practices. So part of this foreign investment that LASWA has attracted has come with a critical component of capacity building, because there's no point building all of the infrastructure or coming with investment for infrastructure when you are not carrying out any kind of capacity building for the human staff themselves. So the foreign investment has actually led to several trainings, retrainings, programs, mostly locally. We've had one or two international, but international was just for the exposure to see how things work over there as well. But mainly it's been building the local capacity to be able to ensure that we can, deliver on an integrated transportation system in Lagos State.
GM, let's look at your monitoring, regulatory and enforcement role, because management of the waterways actually requires some level of effective monitoring and regulation. So what is the framework like for Lagos waterways, and how have you been able to carry out some level of enforcement?
For the waterways sector, being a developing sector, we've employed a carrot and a stick approach. And the reason why I said a carrot approach is that the government is providing the enabling environment for operators to thrive and all stakeholders to enjoy the waterways. But at the same time, which you've also mentioned, is the enforcement bit of it. As you know, without enforcement, we're just going to leave room for all kinds of breaking of rules and regulations. So the state government, the LASWA has a monitoring team which is assigned to the waterways, which goes on daily patrols to ensure that the operators are abiding by the rules and regulations. We've also strategically partnered with the federal government and also other state agencies to ensure that we can monitor our waterways adequately. One of those, of course, is LASEMA, to be able to ensure that we can respond to emergency much quicker. We also have the neighborhood watch as well, which we are partnering with to be able to ensure that beyond the closing times of the waterways, we don't have people who are trying to break those rules at night and have night travel. There have been cases which obviously sometimes have even led to loss of lives, and we've even actually had to, of course, those people who were involved had to face the full wrath of the law and be fully penalized. And of course, we've had several kind of incidents as well. But apart from that, what we've done to be able to ensure a proper framework is that we have now situated our emergency and response services to cover the east, the west, and the central. That way, we're able to respond and able to monitor adequately, effectively and efficiently. So that, because obviously you have to minimize resources and make sure you adequately utilize existing resources as well.
Is LASWA generating revenue from its operations?
Absolutely.
And how has it been really?
Well, it's been good. It continues to increase, especially as we've seen a lot more movement even around the cargo operations on the waterways, where people are trying to, obviously we're trying to decongest Apapa in terms of trucks moving on the roads, where people are now using barges to move containers. We've seen a significant increase in that, and of course they had to be obviously they had to pay the appropriate fees to ensure that we're fully regulating that whole operations as well. We've seen more boats coming into the waterways as well. That's increased. We've seen jetty fees, concession fees, and of course penalties. And of course there's advertisements as well on the waterways as well.
For an agency of this nature, there are likely going to be some level of challenges. What are the challenges you've faced, and how have you been able to surmount these challenges?
Well, the truth about it, there are no challenges, that maybe we're not really a functioning agency. Every agency would have challenges. I think critical to our challenges, of course, will be funding. As you know, every agency will face that. But with every challenge, it presents an opportunity, and you have to make sure you are innovative, which is one of the things you spoke about as we're starting. We have to bring about innovation even with those challenges. And of course, another challenge is cross-cutting functions. We have federal agencies, even some state agencies as well, who have some sort of cross-cutting functions. But with all of these challenges, we found a way to make sure that these agencies, these issues bring about the opportunities for us to exploit and harness, and has brought about collaboration for us as an agency as well, which has been very critical to part of the success stories we've been able to achieve. So I would say funding, cross-cutting functions are really the main challenges we've had.
Okay, in case you're just tuning in, you're watching Transport Lagos on the City of Lagos TV show, and we'll be speaking with the General Manager of LASWA. Now, GM, how would you appraise the level of support from the Lagos State Governor, Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu, to ensuring that LASWA live up to its expectations?
Well, it's been tremendous, and it goes without saying. This is a man who believes in water transport. This is a man who understands the importance of water transport, not just in isolation, but how it links to the road transport and also the rail transport. And as you know, it's all about integration now in Lagos State, and it's very important that you develop all other modes. So he's not left us without support, because he knows that to have an integrated transportation system, every one of these modes must receive significant investment. And that's what he's been focused on, and that's what he's done. As we speak, 15 of the jetties and terminals are currently being upgraded. Patrol boats were purchased. The control room was set up. Our emergency and rescue unit was upgraded. And first of its kind, a device called a USAFE. I was trying to leave that for later, but as well, so I have to speak about that now as a USAFE. It's actually an emergency equipment that, in terms of any emergency, is remote controlled. It can actually go rescue anybody who's stuck on the waterways, or anybody who happens to fall on the waterways and needs to be rescued. So significantly, of course, has also invested in capacity building for the staff of LASWA as well, and for us to expand to be able to ensure we have more safety personnel as well. So significantly, we've received his support, in terms of the required investment that is needed, and of course the encouragement as well that we can do this. And he's a leader who has his ears to the ground, knows everything that is going on, and obviously he's switched on.
Thank you very much. Now, this administration is going to be rounded up soon, at least for this term, and From all indication, considering his very impactful achievements and giant strides, Mr. Governor is working seriously for the second term ticket, and which is obvious, is the man to beat, really. And so for LASWA, because in government there's continuum, Lagosians would like to know, what are those areas your agency intends to consolidate on moving forward in the new term?
Critical thing is safety. You can never overbuild or override the importance of safety. Last year was the best year the waterways in the whole of the history of Lagos has ever experienced in terms of the amount of accidents we had. We had just 2 major accidents. Prior to now, you probably had a minimum of 8, 10, sometimes as much as 15 within the year. But it was only 2 major incidents last year, which for us was critical. And it was not because, yes, we prayed and we hoped that things would get better, but we're intentional in building all of the things I mentioned, the safety system that we put in place. So for us, it's continue to build that safety system so that it gets to a point where we even have 0 accidents on our waterways as well, because that will further boost the confidence of passengers and all other users of the waterway. So for us this year as well is to further continue to build on the safety system and ensure we have a robust safety system. Secondly is, of course, to attract the private sector to provide more boats to Lagosians. And thirdly is to see that whole integration happen between the rail, the water, and the road, so that people then have options and they can plan their trips through technology around these 3 modes of transportation. These 3 things are critical for us this year.
Lagos is known as a city of aquatic splendor. And of course, looking at the natural potential of water in relation with tourism, is LASWA doing some kind of thinking in terms of also expanding the tourist opportunities through the waterways?
Well, absolutely. As you know, we provide the enabling environment for tourism to thrive. Even though it's not directly under my ministry, my agency, but we have to work with all tourism stakeholders and practitioners. We've seen a lot more activity from those who are now visiting a lot of the cultural sites, a lot of the historic sites, especially Badagry. We've seen a lot of movement from, for example, the island to Badagry, people visiting, the slave routes, the first building in Nigeria, several other monuments and several other sites in Badagry. We've also seen a lot more people doing tourism activities to Ilashe, Ibeshe, and the likes as well. So definitely the waterways has become a driving force for waterways tourism, and we are seeing that grow massively. We're seeing a lot more people now even visit the beach sites, so we're seeing a lot more in that area.
When we look at your nature of operation, maybe you'd like to share with us, who are those critical stakeholders that LASWA work with, in order for it to be able to achieve its set objectives?
First of all, we're under the Ministry of Transportation. I'm under the Commissioner for Transportation, Dr. Frederick Oladende, and the Permanent Secretary, and also Special Advisor. So we work with the Ministry of Transportation. And beyond the Ministry of Transportation as well, we also work with the Ministry of Waterfront and Infrastructure Development. They are the ones who build the infrastructure, the terminal jetties and terminal, then they hand over to us, who we operate and maintain. Of course, we work with all other state agencies as may require, from LASEMA to Loma Marine. In terms of federal agency, we work with NIWA, National Inland Waterways Authority, who is the federal agency for the inland waterways. We also work with the MPA, Nigerian Ports Authority, with NIMASA as well. We have some engagements as well with NIMASA. That's for the federal agencies as well. Then in terms of the internationally, of course, we've dealt with the Future Cities, which was a UK-funded program to support the waterways. We're now currently working with AFD, Agency for French Development, which is also a French development agency, which is focused on building, seeing how they can impact on, third world countries in specific areas as well. So these are some of the areas. And of course, in the times past, we've had the World Bank as well support the waterways in Lagos State as well.
GM, on a final note, we want to thank you for coming on the program. And what's your word of encouragement to Lagosians and, of course, assurance to stakeholders on the waterways?
Well, it's to continue to encourage Lagosians that, look, the state government is doing all it can to make sure you use the waterways. We're building safety systems. We're telling you the waterways is safe. Travel water, travel safe. And if you have to use the waterways, please ensure you use your life jackets. Thank you.
Mr. Damilola Emmanuel, the General Manager of the Lagos State Waterways Authority, LASWA, has been speaking to us on Transport Lagos. Of course, he's been able to encapsulate the major strategic achievements of the agency and, of course, giving us futuristic plans and projections of LASWA to make the waterways more safe and more comfortable. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program.
Thank you so much. Pleasure being here.
And the City of Lagos TV show will continue in a moment.